All right. Greetings, everyone, from Greensboro, North Carolina, the headquarters of Remarkable, a Speakers Bureau. And I'm Sue Falcone, founder and CEO of Remarkable, and we're so glad you're here with us. Thanks for coming. And the chat room is open, so send us. We'll do our best to keep up with your chats, but you can hang around for the end and ask questions. Now, I'm really excited to be able to be here today, and I want you to meet our remarkable speaker of the week, Frank King. Oh, yes, he is here. And Frank is a comedian who speaks about depression and suicide. Now, how interesting is that? He's a former comedy writer for The Tonight Show and a best-selling author. Welcome, Frank. And where are you coming to us from?
I am at an undisclosed location in the Federal Witness Protection Program. I am no.
All right.
I am actually Eugene, Oregon is probably the town that everybody would recognize. We're about 25 minutes outside of Eugene, Oregon, is where we are.
Oh, wow. Beautiful country. Beautiful country. Is that where you're from originally?
No, actually, we're living in the house that my lovely wife grew up in. She's from here.
Wow.
I'm from North Carolina originally. Born in Raleigh, went to school in Chapel Hill. My mother went to UNCG when it was women's college.
Oh, yes.
Way back
oh,
when.
Wow. Look, quite a small world, is it not?
That it is.
How we got together. That was really interesting. I love it. I love it. Now, since we shared this out there, Frank, I just want to tell you, I got quite a few interesting comments and questions for you.
Oh.
So we're going to get started. Are you ready?
Yes, and Sue, when I do my comedy and my keynoting like this, I call my show when I do the comedy on the cruise ships, I call it Comedy and Conversation. So that anybody in the audience, I bring the lights halfway up so I can see everybody. Anybody in the audience who has a question or doesn't understand something I say can raise their hand, and you'd be surprised how many people in the middle of my show. So if someone has a question you see on the screen in the chat box that's particularly pertinent to the point I'm trying to make, maybe they need a clarification, I'm certainly willing to stop, dead in my tracks and, pardon the pun, and answer the question if you're game.
Oh, I'm game. We're ready. Okay, so who's here? Just send us that chat and then we can unmute you. You can even talk about it. We'll be glad to do that. So let's get started. And my first question for you, when as a bureau, I represent you, that I say he's a comedian who speaks about depression and suicide, the first thing out of anyone's mind is, how did that happen? How in the world does that mix? So can you share that with us today? We want to know.
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, most of my keynotes start that way. I address the elephant in the room. I go, I know what you're thinking. Comedian talking about depression and suicide. How does that work? Three things. One, I think a comedian is a good choice. And I'll tell you why. If you think about it, a comedian's job is and always has been, since the time of the court jester, to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless. I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often locked in its grip. Number two, I believe where there's humor, there's hope. Where there's laughter, there is life. And that nobody dies laughing. And three, and probably most seriously, depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was all of 4 years old. I screamed for days, according to family legend. And I myself have come close enough to dying by suicide in 2010 after the speaking business, as you well know, dropped off about 80%, and we filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and lost everything we'd worked for about 25 years. That's when I found out what the barrel of my gun tastes like. So it's, people ask me, how'd you choose a topic of depression and suicide? Well, tell you the truth, topic chose me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a journey. And you're here today, and we're so excited that you took that path, and we're certainly glad that you didn't make that choice, but you did see something. Now, how did you get started in comedy, though? How did all that work?
That began at J.Y. Joyner Elementary School in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the fourth grade in Miss Dark's class. Miss Dark knew that I should be wearing my glasses, my new glasses. But we're talking, let's see, I was born in 56, so that would have been the early 60s, Sue. And there were no such thing as fashion frames back then. Girls had cat eye glasses in a couple of colors. Guys had basically that Buddy Holly black plastic with little rockets on them glasses. And I am terribly vain, and I'm also terribly nearsighted. My entire family is nearsighted. I wrote a joke. I said we're descended from a group of people who lived on the island of Myopia, which was conquered over and over because nobody ever saw the enemy coming. So Mrs. Dark knew I didn't want to wear my glasses because people would make fun of me, the other kids. So she had an idea, it was a pretty good idea. She brought me to the front of the room. She thought, let's pull the Band-Aid off. Let's desensitize the entire class to Frank's new glasses. So she got me to the front of the room and we turned my back to the class. She put on my glasses. I turned back to the class and she looks down and she goes, see, you look intelligent. And I looked up at her and said, yes, that would explain all the laughter. She excused herself to go to the teacher's lounge immediately. And years later, I'm in the Winn-Dixie, it's a southern chain of grocery stores. And she said, Frank, do you know why I excused myself to go to the teacher's lounge so quickly that morning? I said, no, it was dark. I had no idea. She goes, that was the funniest thing a child had ever said to me. And I was afraid I was going to laugh in your face and break your heart. So that was my first joke. And at that moment, Sue, I decided I was going to be a comedian. I had no idea how that worked. Fast forward 12th grade. I've been taking 3 years of drama class, never got a good part, never got a speaking role. And I'm not that bright, but by my second semester senior year, I began to think, I see a pattern here. So I thought, if I do stand up, I can write, direct, star, produce my own show every night. So it just so happens they have a 12th grade or senior talent show, and nobody had ever done stand up at the talent show before. So I wrote a 10 or 12 minute routine about things that went on at the school, got up, won the talent show. Went home, told my mama, I'm going to be a comedian. And she said, and I quote, you are going to college first. I don't care what you do when you get done. You could be a goat herder for all I care, but you, my son, are going to be a goat herder with a degree. So, and so I went to Carolina, and a good liberal arts education doesn't hurt anybody. After graduation, my high school and college girlfriend and I moved to San Diego. Now, my high school college girlfriend did not like the idea of Frank doing stand-up comedy, so I was not going to open mic nights. But every time I drove past the comedy club there, which is still there, by the way, in San Diego, it's a branch of the Comedy Store, I felt this magnetic pull. So what I did was, this is what I tell people who say I want to be a comedian. Go to open mic night a couple times, twice. See how bad everybody else is. Give you the courage to get up. So I did that, and I got my courage, and I wanted to go up. And my fourth TED Talk, Sue, is called Suicide, the Secret of My Success. And it's called that because that was in my early 20s. It was the first time I actually had thoughts of suicide. And I had thoughts of suicide because I was married to a lovely woman, but the wrong one. I was selling insurance, which is a great business, but not for me. And I was not going to open mic night. And my thought was, I'm going to kill myself sooner rather than later if something doesn't change. My second thought was, well, what have I got to lose? I could quit my job, divorce my wife, try comedy. If it works, and I think it will, great. If it doesn't, shoot, I can still kill myself. So that's how I got into comedy. That third time I signed my name on the list, I went up, and about halfway through my 5 minutes, inside my head, I heard this: you are home. So at that moment, I decided I was going to make my living as a stand-up comedian. Again, I had no idea how that worked, but I determined in that. That's what I'm saying about comedy, Sue, is you can make a decision within 5 minutes. This is for me, or it's not for me. And I knew, I felt like I had I'm more comfortable on stage than I am in real life oftentimes. So anyway, that's how my career began. Then a year later, I got a couple of bookings, 10 weeks on the road, comedy clubs. And I asked my girlfriend, now my wife of 32 years, I'm going on the road to do stand-up comedy. I got 10 weeks booked. Do you want to come along? And she said yes, inexplicably. So we put everything into storage we couldn't fit into my tiny little Dodge Colt. And we were on the road, she and I, for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop. We worked with and lived with, because back then they used to put you up in a comedy condo. Jeff Foxworthy and Ron White, Ellen DeGeneres, Rosie O'Donnell, Dennis Miller, Dana Carvey, Kevin Nealon, Kevin James. And did that for 7 years and change without a home, just a post office box and voicemail. And you know, all that time, Sue, having been in the insurance business and seen them, you know, the sort of the old school motivational speakers like Zig Ziglar and his generation, I would sit there and watch those guys and think, I could do that if I just had something to teach somebody. Because I always wanted to make a living and a difference. I just could not figure out, you know, what I had to share with anybody that would make them better after they heard me speak. And then after I came so close to dying by suicide, by the way, spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine came up to me after a keynote. He'd never heard me say that before. And he said this, and I quote, "Hey man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?" So after all that, I read a book by a speaker named Judy Carter called The Message of the You, Turn Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. And I'm a friend of Judy's. I got the book, and I thought going into the book, Sue, I got nothing. About halfway through, the way Judy leads you through that process, it hit me. I do have something to teach people. And so I used Judy's book to help me prepare for my first TEDx. And at age 52 on the TEDx stage, I came out as depressed and suicidal. Nobody knew, my family, my wife, my friends. I came out. What I discovered on the way to the TED Talk, you know, as I prepared, nobody talks much about suicide or depression. But if you mention it out loud, almost everybody has a story. I mean, people I've just met tell me the most amazing things when I just mentioned the words depression and suicide. So that told me that there was a niche for me in that market. If I am willing to get up, and as Brene Brown would say, and be vulnerable on stage and tell my story. And Judy calls it, tell them your messes and your stresses, and then tell them your successes. So the messes and stresses is your vulnerability. I said to somebody after reading Brene's book on vulnerability, you know, I do believe vulnerability is my superpower because it allows other people who are in the room and listening to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding depression and thoughts of suicide without recrimination. My job, bottom line, Sue, almost every client says this to me, we brought you in here to start the conversation on suicide. Because it's like the first couple on the dance floor. Everybody to dance, the band's cranking, but nobody's on the dance floor. And then one couple goes out, starts dancing, all of a sudden everybody's dancing. That's my job, is to come in, start the conversation, and let them give, you know, voice to their feelings and experiences without recrimination.
What a journey. Let me tell you, that's a risk.
Yeah.
You know, when you think it is definitely a risk, but it's also transparency, because that's what great speakers are. They're willing to be transparent.
Yep.
And because they have a message in that transparency. Now, you got there, you were out there doing comedy and all. Now, how did you get to the Tonight Show? How did that happen?
I was on the road doing stand-up, and I don't know if you recall, but back in the day, Johnny would have on Monday nights, Johnny Carson would be Best of Carson, a rerun. And then Tuesday through Friday, Johnny was live. And Johnny was very mercurial. He would come in on a Friday afternoon and tell his staff, I'm taking next week off. Well, that's good for him, but Jay was the permanent guest host. So then Jay gets a phone call. Johnny's taking next week off. Now, Jay has 4 nights, Tuesday through Friday, he's got 18 jokes a night per monologue, and he has to construct over the weekend. So he started hiring comedians, putting them under contract as independent contractors. And I just happened to bump into somebody who was doing it. I asked, how does it happen? He said, you just ask for the paperwork. You know, it's a 1099 kind of thing, contractor. Got the paperwork, signed it, faxed it back when we used fax machines. And then when Jay would put the call out, I'm working next week, I would crank out 12, 2 dozen jokes a day on current events and send them to Jay's staff, who then Jay would try them out. And I was getting on a couple a week anytime he was guest hosting. And then when he got the job for real, then he let most of the contract players go, but they contacted me and said, we'd like you to stay on. And I stayed on with him sending in a dozen to dozen jokes a day until the day he left the show.
Wow. It sounds easy, doesn't it, everyone? Not quite though, does it? I mean, it's hard work. How do you create a joke? How do you create it? You take just a situation, no matter what it is, and create. How do you do that?
Well, most of Jay's jokes are topical. And so everybody was working from the same source material. Back then it was USA Today and whatever. I used to read the USA Today and then whatever the local paper was where I was, and the New York Times. And I would find topics. And oftentimes what I would do is I would watch Jay's monologue. I would make a note of the topics he covered in each of those 18 jokes. So I knew he liked the topic. So I would try to write an even better joke on the same topic. And the one I remember is he came on and goes, yeah, you know, the Swiss they've opened a condom factory. Should we really be buying condoms from a country that makes cheese with holes in it? And I thought, there's another joke there. So I sent in this joke. The Swiss have a condom factory, but you know the Swiss. It's not just a condom. It's a condom. It's a pocket knife. It's a pair of scissors. It's a corkscrew. Because the Swiss Army knife. So I knew he liked the premise. I just had to come up with a second punchline. And oftentimes that's how I sold, is I was able to capitalize on what was top of mind with him.
Great. Oh, wow. That's interesting. That's fascinating. And then how did you transition though from being that funny stand-up comedian that you worked for all these years and been through all these trials with it and all like this? How did you transition to a speaker then who's funny?
Yeah, and that's what Judy would say. That's her phrase there. Actually, she, thanks to her book, I went from a funny speaker to a speaker who was funny. The way I did it was my first branding exercise was that first TEDx talk. I knew because for all the speakers bureaus out there and meeting planners, I was a clean, funny comic, and that was great. But after the recession, they said, Frank, look, we love you. We love the clean comedy, but you have to teach our audience something. So the first TEDx helped me rebrand. And of course, those big red letters behind you, don't hurt your career. It's probably not going to, I coach TEDx talks. They always ask me, is this going to get me a booking? Probably not. However, when someone goes to your website and they see those big red letters, it gives you credibility and it's good for branding and marketing. So I leveraged that first TEDx to make sure that all the speaker bureaus got a copy, the link for my TEDx, so they would now know. And it was a bit of a process to go from funny speaker to speaker who's funny. I think I pretty much got every bureau in the country, every meeting planner I've worked with now knows that I can be serious, but with comic relief in between. There's a reason they call it comic relief in between the serious parts. And I used the 18 minutes of the first TEDx to create my first keynote of 45. And then I began to, market that keynote, suicide prevention as a workplace health and safety issue. I decided on January 1st, 2018, and a lot of speaker coaches will tell you this, I picked a lane. I stopped doing anything else. Unless somebody called and asked me to do something else. But in terms of marketing, I decided I'm going to market myself strictly as a suicide prevention speaker, mostly suicide prevention as a workplace health and safety issue. Now, if somebody calls and says, we want you to do comedy at our banquet, I'm happy to. When I did the Washington State Veterinary Medical Association, they said, could you do 45 minutes of comedy at the awards banquet on Friday and then do a couple of breakouts on suicide prevention and stress management on Saturday? Sure, happy to. I'll acid wash the pool if you're paying my daily rate. So I began to, and then the second good decision I made was there's 10 or 12 occupations that are highest risk for suicide. And they go like this: construction, mining, excavation, fishing, farming, forestry. And then you get into the white collar occupations: dentist, veterinarian, physician. And of the top 10 or 12, I picked the ones that are actively trying to do something about the rate of suicide in their industry. Dentists were the first to tumble to that. I got a call from Seattle Study Club and said, we've never had a speaker on suicide, but would you come up and do 15 minutes to kind of a showcase on suicide prevention? And I did. And the gimmick I used, Sue, it came to me on a cruise ship, and I ran it past another entertainer, and he goes, oh my God. So what I did was, instead of having a PowerPoint presentation, There were two screens. I got a countdown clock and put 15 minutes up on both screens. As soon as I hit the stage, the clock starts counting down like on a bomb. And I said to them, every year in the United States, 47,000 people die by suicide. That's one every 15 minutes. And I pointed at the clock. And I said, that means at this moment in this country, somebody somewhere in my tribe has less than 15 minutes to live. So I'm doing my speech. They're watching me, but you can see they're also watching the clock because they don't know, am I going to stop it before it gets to zero? Am I going to let the guy die? And at the end, in the last minute, I say, you can make a difference. You can save a life. And you can do it oftentimes by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, start a conversation, because 8 out of 10 people who are considering suicide are ambivalent. They want someone to interrupt. And 9 out of 10 people who are suicidal give hints in the last 7 days leading up to an attempt. Verbal, nonverbal, direct, indirect, behavioral. If you know what to look for, what to say and do, anybody can stop a suicide. It is the most preventable cause of death on the planet. You can stop a suicide. And the tech guy working with me, I go, before their time runs out. And he stops the clock at 7 seconds. They leap to their feet. They're clapping, they're crying. It just told me, I had a neurologist come up who was there. She was one of the speakers. She goes, here's the deal, Frank. Here's why they're on their feet crying. You are speaking from your heart and not your head. That's why it had that impact.
Wow. What do you see right now in the situations we have been in these last weeks, and now we're gradually coming out of it? What do you think? Has the suicide rate increased, and is it going to be even more at this point?
I'm afraid so. I don't know the suicide rate, but I do know this. The calls to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline have increased in the double digits. And so has domestic abuse and child abuse, because everybody's stuck at home.
Right.
And I've been doing webinars and podcasts because people have been calling me because, I'm in sort of in the mental health business. I had a friend of mine called me. He goes, Frank, you're in the mental health business, right? I go, yeah. So I'm not a clinician, but I'm sort of in the mental health business. He goes, look, I need to know if there's a name for what I have. He goes, I can't eat, I can't sleep. When I do sleep, I don't want to get out of bed. I can't drag myself to the bathroom, wash my hair. I don't want to get dressed. I don't want to leave the house. Is there a mental health name for that? I said, yeah, Thursday. Because that's welcome to my world. I realized that the things that people with mental illness do on a daily basis as part of their self-care plan to actually get us out of the bed and put our feet on the floor and put one in front of the other until it's time to go back to bed are things that the people currently, I created a keynote called Social Distancing and Staying Sane with tips on how to do that. There's, for example, my self-care plan is diet. I'm on the keto diet. I do the 18-6 intermittent fasting. Diet, exercise. I got some exercise equipment. I got an old Nordic track. It works. And it's harder than it looks. Diet, exercise, good night's sleep. And by the way, with a good night's sleep, I tell them you need a routine. That's what mentally ill people often do, is make sure they have a routine. Go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, get up and shave, shower, wash your face, wash your hair, get dressed. Even though you're not getting dressed for work, get dressed, and then plan your meal times. And then I have 2 naps or meditations, each one right after a meal. And then plan your fun time, your exercise time, and limit your media consumption to an hour or so a day. And be very careful. Pick your media outlet. I like to listen to our governor and our mayor because they're here on the ground in Oregon. So they understand the situation here within the state of Oregon. But those are the kind of things that I've been doing for decades, that, people go to work every day and they've got a list of things to do at work. They have very much a schedule, a routine, a framework. All of a sudden they're home and have to manage their time and still have to work. But it's just not, it's the uncertainty, I think. Uncertainty, anxiety, depression. I believe the rates of depression will, self-reported situational depression, not necessarily clinical depression, as I have, will go up, and anger. If you're at the store and you're wearing a mask and the person behind you is not, and they come with it, within that 6-foot bubble, or if someone has given you are aware of who gave you the virus, you're angry at them. So there are a lot of things you can do to mitigate during this period of this pandemic. And I always say, don't be too hard on yourself. If you don't find yourself working from home being super productive, it's okay. Times are uncertain. I did a radio show this morning, a little tiny town in Iowa, Denison, Iowa. And I said, look, got a lot of parents at home teaching who aren't educators. And some of them are just like, I'm afraid I'm not doing what I should be doing. I said, relax, because the teachers know when school starts, hopefully in the fall, that some of the kids are going to be behind, and there's going to need to be some remedial teaching. And if your child, let's say, took Algebra 1 last year and they didn't do so well, why not use this time to go back through Algebra 1, so when they get back to school in the fall, they're ready for Algebra 2. So, don't strap your kid to a chair in the dining room for 6 hours and force them to do schoolwork. At school, you do an hour, you take an art class. You do an hour, you go to recess. You do an hour, you go to lunch. So it's, realize that it's not just 6 hours of education every day. I think, and your family will appreciate it.
And you have children, right? You're doing this, right?
Oh, I have 3 German Shepherds and 10 cats.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm homeschooling each and every one.
Well, that's great. This has been so interesting to know exactly what your world is and how it can be applied to a lot of things, a lot of areas, and those top ones that are in that suicide rate. I was really kind of surprised about the dentist. I'll be very honest with you, but I guess I can kind of see that a little bit clearer now, because there's lots of things that go on there, and so I can see that. So coming full circle back around, what do you think then is your why? Why going forward is what you feel like you are ready to do, ready to get out there, whether it's like we say at Remarkable, whether you're on stage or whether you're online virtually, you're still in person.
Yes.
So we can, still manage that, because I don't know, we're uncertain in our industry. We don't know what's coming next, but we know that there's a place for all of it and that we're willing to join it. That's why we're here today. We're learning, we're understanding how to do that. So what is your why?
Well, and by the way, on the virtual, I spoke to another Speakers Bureau person a week ago. I called him on another issue, and he said, Frank, listen, I got some advice for you. He said, I saw the demo clip you sent me of a webinar, like 5 minutes of a webinar you were doing on suicide prevention. And it was a standard straight up Zoom, and everybody's sitting, everybody's wearing a headset. He said, Frank, I got a video from a speaker yesterday, and he is standing, and he's not wearing a headset, and he's got, a nice background. So it looks like a keynote. Mm-hmm. That he said, the other is more of a teleconference. What you and I are doing today is something of a virtual keynote. And with the chat box, we can interact. But my why, Sue, is this. I have something called chronic suicidal ideation, or chronic suicidality. And it's somewhat rare. People who are in my tribe and myself, it means that suicide is on the menu as an option, as a solution for problems large and small. Always. It's like mental music. It's always running underneath. You don't always notice it, but it's there. For example, a couple of years ago, my car broke down, and I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. And I tell that story every time I keynote. And what I found is every time, I think there may have been one exception, but almost every time I've spoken, keynoted, and told that story, somebody has come up. What I do is I say, look, we're going to do a general Q&A. And then after that, if anybody has individual questions, you don't want to ask in front of everybody, like, hey, I'm crazy, can you help me? Make it funny. Come see, I'll stick around until I've answered everybody's questions one at a time. Sometimes there's a couple of people, sometimes there's 8 lined up with a question. Oftentimes, almost every time, somebody in the audience has chronic suicidal ideation and they had no idea it had a name. They just thought they were some kind of freak. And I did a dental conference. I did my keynote. Everybody's leaving the room except one woman. She's coming toward me, and I can see she's crying. And when she gets to me, she's crying so hard, Sue, she cannot speak. So I took a chance and I said, "You have chronic suicidal ideation." And she nodded. I said, you did not know it had a name? Nod. You just thought you're some kind of freak? Nod. But do you have a therapist back home? Nod. I said, when you get home, set an appointment and tell your therapist what you learned today. And for goodness sakes, tell him you Googled it. Don't tell him you learned it from a comedian. And a week later, I got an email from her. She said, "Frank, I believe I was at that dental conference simply to meet you. You've changed my life." And I can't say that about a lot of people. So about a month after that, Sue, I'm doing a college suicide prevention speech keynote in Billings, Montana, University of Montana, Billings. I've done my speech. I'm standing outside, waiting for the young man to come get me, take me back to the hotel. It's dusk. It's starting to snow. I can hear a river in the distance. And I'm thinking of all these people that have come up afterwards. And perhaps, Sue, I've steered them just far enough off the path to suicide that they'll live a normal life. And I think it was the time of day, the snow, the river, and that thought about the path. It hit me. Here's my why. I am sort of like that character George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown by an angel, perhaps the one that kept me from pulling the trigger, what people's lives would be like if I were not there to speak and let them know they are not alone. And my second thought was, I cannot kill myself, because if I did, I would take each and every one of those people with me. And a friend of mine said, "You can't live with that?" I said, "No, man, I can't die with that." And that's my why.
Wow. And we've got a question about workplace violence incidents. Do you get asked to present at companies? Is this part of the package that you put out there that, that could be part of who you are and that you can help that?
Yes, I spoke at what's called the BPPPA. It's a big safety association last August in New Orleans. 1,000 safety managers, everybody was in safety. And I said to them, okay, how many people here have been involved, raise your hand, in an active shooter drill? Almost every hand went up because that's a big deal in safety. And I said, well, I got to tell you, we're all in the prevention business. I am, you are. I mean, that's what a safety manager, safety person does. It's all about preventing, someone from getting injured or killed. I said, an active shooter drill is not prevention. It's mitigation. At that point, you are just trying to keep the body count down. I said, this may be a radical idea, but how about this? How about instead of, or you should probably still do the active shooter drill, just in case. But how about this? Let's go farther upstream, as they say in mental health. Let's go way upstream. And upstream, have somebody like me come in and with all the HR and all the managers and all the supervisors and teach them the signs and symptoms of depression, thoughts of suicide, what to do, what to say, what not to do, what not to say. And then on the heels of my training, bring in somebody who does conflict resolution and train all the HR people and all the managers and all the supervisors on conflict resolution so that they can spot someone who they believe is depressed and having thoughts of suicide, and then talk to them and find out if this is being triggered by someone or something in the workplace. And if it's someone or more than someone, then you do the conflict resolution midstream. Get everybody together and you work out whatever the beef is. So maybe you never have to put your active shooter drill skills to work. A friend of mine said to me, he goes, Frank, here's the simile I use. He says, if you're standing by a river and their body's coming by, don't just pull the bodies out of the water, go upstream and find out who's throwing them in. That's the point. Why not go way upstream and avoid having to use those active shooter drill skills?
That's finding the root cause. This is what some of our people are saying, finding the root cause, right?
Go
That's how you
upstream.
can prevent this, right?
Yeah, go upstream, see who's throwing the bodies in.
Let me ask you a personal question. What do you do for fun? What does fun look like to you?
I'm believe it or not, I know you can't tell my clothes on, but I'm a senior or master's level bodybuilder. It was on the bucket list, Sue. I always wanted to be a bodybuilder. When I was 20, everybody was way too big. There was no way I'm going to compete. But I figured if I waited till I was 60 and got in the master's class, pretty much everybody else was giving up. So I go to the gym. I'm on the keto diet. I do the fasting. I did my first bodybuilding contest, and it was terrifying. October 2018, and I took third in my category, 16 above. And my goal is to, by the time I'm 65, win my category of 16 above, and then do what they call win the overall, meaning if you win your category, you can compete against the 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds. And if you're good enough, and it's not about size when you're 60, it's about proportion, vascularity, muscularity, you can actually win the overall and get what's called a pro card. My goal is to get my pro card by the time I turn 65. That's what I do for fun.
Wow, that sounds exciting. That sounds exciting.
Yeah, but look at this. You could say bodybuilder, people go, really?
Okay.
I'm thinking, with my clothes on, I don't look that good. But so I'm thinking about writing a book, a diet and exercise book, Sue, called Look Good Naked.
Another question, what does your wife think about this hobby? How does...
When I met her, when she was a young woman here in town, Eugene, what saved her life was she had kind of a rough start in life, foster child, juvenile detention. And at 18, she wandered into a gym and discovered vegetarian eating and lifting weights. And I've got a magazine somewhere, a muscle mag with her on a bench in a women's bench press competition. Yeah, I mean, her guns are far larger than mine. And she would tell you, Sue, one of the reasons she married me is because she can take me. And she still can.
That's a perfect match, though, then. I mean, that works really, really well.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to let our people that are with us, if they would like to, anybody, you can unmute your mic and let's ask him a question personally. Would you like to do that? Everyone that's with us. Any takers?
I've been asking my questions, Sue, and you've been lobbing them very well. Frank, you're hysterical. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Especially with a very serious topic.
And by the way, on that note, from a speaker bureau perspective, people say to me, do people not book you for that topic because you are a comedian? And I said, no, you've got it backwards. They book me, they come looking for me because I am a comedian, because it's very difficult to sit through 45 to 60 minutes of death and dying without some comic relief. So I more often than not get the job because, I wrote jokes for Jay Leno for 20 years.
That's true. That's a good point, to say. And for TEDx speaking, you've got some great views on your TEDx's. So people are looking, they are absolutely seeing your gift and your talent. Anyone else have a question online?
I don't think I answered her question, actually, Sue. I think I interrupted with my story.
No, you did answer the why. We know the why.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got it. Yeah. Because, hey, that line that you have about what you're going to write the book and put that line in about the dying is amazing. That you think about that you think if you didn't do this, if you weren't here, how many lives would you lost?
To let people know they're not alone. And that is it's my tribe. And it's my goal is to work myself out of a job. Well, Frank, we'd like to hire you, but nobody's dying by suicide anymore. Yes.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. And you've got some great solutions that people can use, and they've been around. But they just can't see someone that's been there. And I think that's the draw.
Yeah, what it is, and oftentimes people say after suicide, I'm sure you've heard this, Sue, he gave no indication. She didn't say anything. I had no idea. Well, if you know what to look for and what to listen for, the signs and symptoms and the, like I said, 9 out of 10 people in that last week leading up to a suicide attempt give you hints, and 8 out of 10 want you to interrupt.
Mhm. That is, I will remember that. We will all remember that. I think that will be key to us. Now, there's one more quote, and I was looking for it because I saw it come through the other day, and I thought it was so hysterical that you were saying something about you're a crazy person.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, that one. What's that quote?
well, I don't know if you're talking about this, but every time I do something like this, I give out my cell phone number.
Mhm.
Every time I keynote, I put it up on the screen, and you're welcome to put it in the show notes too. Because if you're suicidal, I recommend you call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or text for younger people, text the text line, which is 741-741. This is a line from Brene Brown, because if you call a crazy person, I'm sorry, if you're suicidal, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you're just having a really bad day, call a crazy person, because we're less likely to be judgmental. We're just going to listen. And people oftentimes ask me, Sue, what do I do with my friend who's depressed? What do I say? Don't say anything, just actively listen. And here's why this works. This is a line from Brene Brown, and it gave me chills. I stopped and went, oh. I am so comfortable in my darkness that I can sit with you in yours. That's why you call a crazy person when you're just having a really bad day.
Right. Well, I'm willing if you want to give out your cell phone number, you just go right ahead.
It's area code 858-405-5653. 858-405-5653. And actually 5653 is LAFF. It's kind of something left over from my comedy career.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's because people with mental illness hear a different music. When I'm on stage and I say to the audience, I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. You can see that people with mental illness lean forward. And I had a young woman at Lynchburg College came up afterwards to kind of give you a hug. And okay, that's right in the middle of Me Too movement. Everybody in the room has got a phone with a camera. And I can just picture the headline the next day, speaker gropes co-ed. So I gave a really brotherly, move the pelvis back hug. And I said to her, are you a hugger? She goes, no, I'm not a hugger. I said, well, why the hug? She goes, I've been in therapy for 2 years. And the young woman who's my therapist is very good. I mean, she's well credentialed, but she has no context. She goes, I'm sitting in the back of the room 15 minutes into your presentation, and I'm thinking, this guy is inside my head. You have done more for me in 45 minutes than she has done for me in 2 years, because she and I hear the same music.
That's a powerful message, and you have that to share. And I'm thrilled and honored to represent you at Remarkable Speakers Bureau, because I know when we met, I knew this was not a normal topic that maybe I would have even thought, well, can I find clients for Frank? But I realize now, we didn't realize up front what we were going to be going through and what advantage. I just see enormous. So if anyone that sees this wants to certainly get in touch with us, we'd love to share a conversation of how Frank can be at your next event, whether it's on stage or virtually online. And we want to make sure that everyone realizes what a talent and a gift you are to us, because that's the key. That's the key, that you can help so many. And I just thank you for your valuable time today. And I have one more question. I am looking at your jacket, and is that a safety pin on your jacket?
Oh yeah. Are you not familiar with the safety pin?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, during Brexit, way back when, people in England or Great Britain were giving voice to their feelings about marginalized groups.
Okay.
Gays, blacks, immigrants, things you wouldn't have normally said out loud a decade ago. So they created a safety pin movement. So if you see somebody wearing a safety pin, I'm a safe place. And it spread here. And here's my favorite story. There's a woman who had just come from somewhere in the Middle East, and she was Muslim, and she's with her daughter in the grocery store, and they both have the hijab, and it's Thanksgiving, rolling up to Thanksgiving, and they have no clue what what do you fix for Thanksgiving. So they saw a woman wearing a safety pin, so they felt safe to go up and say, "Listen, would you please explain to us Thanksgiving?" So the woman walked them around the store. They bought turkey, they bought yams, they bought marshmallows to melt on top of the yams, and the sweet potatoes, turkey, and everything was going just fine until they got to the stuffing. And the woman was explaining where you put the stuffing. And that seemed, you put the stuffing where and why? Well, take the giblets out first. I think we've all made that mistake. But that's an example of the and there, I tell you this, I've been studying Spanish for a long time. We have a large Hispanic population here. And if I hear somebody speaking Spanish in the grocery store, let's say, I speak Spanish back. And they just light up because you're showing respect by stepping across a language barrier. And again, that's the verbal version of a safe place. Now the problem is I can fake a dialect, Sue, really well, which makes them think I can really speak it. So they start the machine gun.
Right.
Whoa, más despacio, por favor. Slow down, please. But yeah, it's that I'm a safe place. If somebody has an issue, they know they're not going to get harshed on. Let me give you a mental health one for that. I did a show for Clow, CLOW, manufacturing. They make pretty much all the fire hydrants in the country. If you next time you see a fire hydrant, see if you don't see CLOW. And they had me in for a safety banquet. They have a safety day. They have a safety day first of every year. And they put into their standard operating procedures in their employee handbook, if you think someone is depressed, having thoughts of suicide, that's why they brought me in to teach them, then you, as an employee, you should ask them, say, I'm concerned. And if someone asks you, the first thing out of your mouth by the SOPs, the standard operating procedure for Clow manufacturing, if somebody asks you, are you depressed, having thoughts of suicide, you have to say, thank you. Thank you for caring. Even if the next thing you say is, look, we have a new baby, haven't slept in 3 days, I'm not depressed, I'm just sleep deprived. But that way, people feel comfortable asking because they know they're not going to get harshed on for asking.
Right.
Which I thought was just flat and brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, Frank, it has been a pleasure to be with you today and hear everything that you have to share. And I look forward to hearing more of those stories because you're going to be out there sharing and you're going to hear them. So that's exactly where we're at. So thanks for everything. I hope you have a remarkable week and we will be in touch soon.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Bye.